Welcome back to the Orchid City Zoo. Hey guys, Kingpin here. Welcome to the next episode of Sandbox Mode. In case you're new to the channel, we've currently been working on a build called Savannah at Dusk, which houses African nocturnal animals. It's been incredibly fun. In today's episode, we have one goal and one goal only: to finish the build. We still have a decent amount of work to do in this episode. For starters, we have to add the animal of the day. We also need 2 new exhibit animals and to completely finish the exterior as well as the interior of the building. Off camera, I added a little bit of a curb and a solid wall of foliage to the exterior of the plaza at Savannah at Dusk. This stops guest flow from overwhelming the animals inside of here and making them stressed. This isn't part of the blueprint, or even the same building group, so technically it's not part of Savannah at Dusk, so I decided to do it off camera. Every single thing we add to the build today, you're going to be able to download straight off the workshop as soon as the episode goes live. You may be asking, what's so special about this build? It doesn't look like anything I haven't seen before. Come back at night and you'll find out. The answer is the lighting. It took forever to tinker with this to get the right effect. Every single exhibit has a really nice red backglow that really encapsulates the dark. It certainly wasn't easy. Matter of fact, it was probably the hardest thing I've done in this game since its release. That's why I'm so excited to say we can finally finish the build in this episode. If you like this video, and the series in general, don't forget to like and subscribe. We'd be happy to have you in this wonderful community we're growing, and check the link in the video to join our free Discord. Before construction begins today, we actually have an exciting announcement from our African penguin enclosure. Last night, we actually had our first hatchlings born. Please welcome our 2 newest members to the Orchid City Zoo family. They're getting very accustomed to their new home and diet, and are expected to take their first steps into the public eye any day now. They were just born 2 days ago, so they can't quite swim yet. This is completely normal behavior, and we're very confident at the Orchid City Zoo that they'll be able to join the rest of the flock in the water in no time. The African penguins already had their time in the spotlight. Today we need to build for the animal that's going to go right here in this exterior enclosure. It's also connected to this fairly large interior, so whatever this animal is, it shouldn't really be solitary. We also have 2 more exhibits to fill. However, this is going to be incredibly easy, and we'll do this last. Today we're going to be adding our first rodent to the zoo, the African crested porcupine. Let's check the Zoopedia and make sure we can meet all of their needs. This is quite the bizarre range of territory that they have. It looks like a lot of them live right across the equator, but some of them go into northern Africa and even up into Italy. They need 310 square meters of land space, so the habitat we already have planned out for them should work perfectly. They also appear to be quite flexible with how many porcupines they'll allow into their social group. As long as you have at least 1, obviously, and no more than 6, they're going to be happy with whatever. This is the first animal in Savannah at Dusk that's actually completely herbivorous. They're not even omnivores. Look at their enrichment items and food. Lastly, it doesn't appear that the African crested porcupines have any cohabitation bonuses with other species. This is going to be a relatively difficult exhibit to start, because honestly, I'm not really sure where to start. We're going to be working the outside in to make sure the exterior of Savannah at Dusk is finished before the inside, though. Meet our 2 African crested porcupines. We have a male and a female. Like always, leave name suggestions in the comments below for both of them. We're going to be revealing every single name for every animal in Savannah at Dusk in the tour. It certainly took a while for them to actually come inside so we could start building the exterior enclosure, but eventually they figured out how the screen door works. They've had a long day. Let's let them rest while we make them an excellent habitat. Typically I don't put the animals in until the habitat is at least a little bit done, but truthfully I had no clue what the porcupines needed. Luckily, it appears that they like a lot of sand, and I say luckily because it's going to contrast really well with the exterior gray of Savannah at Dusk. They like a lot of soil too, so I'm going to use one of my favorite terrain editing details and make a little path of the soil inside of the sand to mimic where the porcupines would walk. I want to put a majority of their enrichment items outside too. This is going to contrast from the rest of Savannah at Dusk. This plant screen is going to provide them with a lot of good shade, since there's not a whole lot out here. We'll give them this Halloween ball. It is October after all. The sand was looking a little bit plain in my opinion, so I put some dry din grass in there to spice it up. Despite coming from the Arid DLC pack, I didn't want these porcupines to live in a complete desert. To fix this, I put some normal din grass down. The grass mixed with the sand does look incredibly nice in my opinion. However, a rock here is really going to draw the sides together. We have one arid side and one more lush. I decided to use some of this red oak grass to make this rock look the most arid out of everything in this exhibit so far. Finally, for the exterior, I decided to give them a little tree sapling. They could use a little bit more shade out here. The plant screen might not be enough. Ignoring the basic facade of the building, which we're going to fix any minute now, I actually really like how this exterior portion of the exhibit looks. The wall looks nice, the interior detail looks nice, there's nice access to the inside. I think the porcupines are going to love it. Here they come now. I hope I'm right. I wonder what enrichment item they're going to play with first. This isn't necessarily playing, but it's close enough. I'm glad you like your watermelon. And this one seems to like the plant screen. I'm glad they're using everything. Now that the porcupines have an adequate space to roam around in the public eye, let's pretty up the outside of their enclosure using some of the same wood from the main build. The wood trim really sells the fact that this is an extension of Savannah at Dusk, not something entirely different. Now, unfortunately, we have to do a part of the build I've been dreading. As of right now, Savannah at Dusk looks pretty good, even passable. However, there's still way too much plaster appearing. It looks like a big gray blob. By far, the easiest way to mitigate this problem, if you're having it yourself, is to use an accent color. For us, we're using this wood. While building, I was very careful to keep Savannah at Dusk relatively symmetrical. This is because it makes copy and pasting over details a lot easier. After you get the rough outline of where you want your detailed portions to be, don't be afraid to have some interesting angles. I put this one at a simple 45-degree angle, and I think it made the build look 100 times more dynamic. Eventually I realized that there was a window in the center of these details, so I had to scrap it because that kind of kills the point of a build you really want to be dark and is primarily open during the day. I'll let you figure that one out for yourself. Eventually I scrapped it and just replaced it with another cross. That definitely looks a lot better already. However, we still have a lot of work to do on the outside of this thing before it's done. After placing a lot of trim on the outside of the plaster of Savannah at Dusk, I decided to place some lampposts and some other little exterior details to make it nicer. Now that's looking a lot better already. The wood trims really bring the entire build together. I'm thinking the last thing we need for now are just some small roof details. This has gotta be my favorite section of the Orchid City Zoo so far. Now we have to start working on the inside of the build though. This is gonna be a lot tougher. The plans for the interior are relatively simple. The first thing we're gonna do is completely finish the porcupines enclosure. We're effectively working from the inside out. Eventually, the whole thing's gonna be done. I wanted to start off the interior with something relatively quick and easy. Door frames are always a good way to go in my opinion if you're looking for something to do that's really fast. All I had to do is take exactly what I did before in the previous episode, copy and paste it, flip it 180 degrees, and I was done. Afterwards, I realized that this room was filled with a little bit too many right angles to look good in my opinion, so I simply took this piece of vertical wooden plank, rotated it 15 degrees instead of 45, and then placed it on a slight angle across the trim. The less plaster that's showing in here, the better. Not that plaster looks bad at all, quite the opposite. I actually think it's one of the best things to come out of any DLC, especially the Africa pack, which isn't known for its building materials. However, I really wanted to cover a lot of it up with wood. I thought it would make this room unique. Speaking of attempting to make the room unique, I decided to give this a little glass roof. You'll see why very shortly, but the effect is going to be really interesting because we're going to have plants on top of here that the red light is going to be able to shine through. To get this effect, I simply took some ivy patches of varying sizes, rotated them all 180 degrees, and have them growing on the bottom of the glass. It's really simple, but also really effective. The wood trim really makes it stand out among the rest of Savannah at Dusk. Starting the interior porcupine enclosure, I grabbed one of these plaster corner pieces from a planter. Not to spoil anything in this habitat, but it ended up having to be a lot more simple than I wanted it to be. For that reason, I kept the majority of the foliage confined to these planters in the corner of the exhibits. When making any planter, especially out of the 4-meter long wall, I find that the 2-meter long mulch pattern really works a lot better if not breaking through the walls. Since we used a lot of mulch in the corners, I decided to use a lot of heavy soil to blend it all in. One of the main goals I had when starting Savannah at Dusk is to make all 4 of the habitats completely different. The aardvark has a lot of rock, the caracal is more lush, and the fennec foxes have a lot of desert and sand. I really tried to incorporate all 3 of these things when creating the porcupine exhibit, so the left-hand side took inspiration from the aardvark enclosure. I decided to really overdo it with the rocks on this side of the habitat compared to the other. That's not to say we're not going to have any lush plant life in here. We did take the time to make 2 planters, it would be a shame if we didn't actually use them. Continuing with the plant life, but changing up the color a little bit, I decided to move over to some of this red oak grass. We used it on the outside portion of the exhibit, and I really liked how it blended with the rock. We're going to use the same technique on the inside. I also wanted to give the porcupines a little bit of enrichment on the inside. I added a few things, like an herb scent maker and a fountain. Both of the porcupines were incredibly thirsty, probably because they've been in here a while and we forgot to add water to the outside. This is what we've got so far, and unfortunately this is where the video takes a drastic turn for the worse. See, progress was going incredibly well actually. Savannah at Dusk was on schedule to be completed around the normal time. Then the game out of nowhere started getting really laggy and freezing on me every 2 minutes. Basically what I'm trying to say is that I lost absolutely everything you've seen up until this point. The reason this video took so long to make is because I effectively had to make the entire video twice. If you want to know how it felt, imagine that you're watching this video, minding your own business, probably relaxed, and then this happens. Welcome back to the Orchid City Zoo. Hey guys, Kingpin here. Welcome to the next episode of Sandbox Mode. I have absolutely no idea what kept causing these freezes. It had never happened to me a single time ever in this game before, and our complexity meter is only at 35%. After using the video footage and pretty much mimicking everything I already built down to the T so we didn't have to redo the video, I eventually decided to kind of give up on the indoor portion of the porcupine exhibit, because that's where the freezes kept happening. I then decided to work on the exhibits. In the first of the 2 new exhibits, we have the sacred scarab beetle. Pretty cool to have an insect in Savannah at Dusk. We only have one other in Asia Quest. The final animal ever to be added to Savannah at Dusk is the Goliath frog. The last thing I did on the interior, which luckily was already mostly complete before this episode started, was add a few more education boards for our African crested porcupine. Since these animals are new, we didn't really have a whole lot representing them here in the Orchid City Zoo. Thankfully, after batting off all of life's curveballs, including the production problems that plagued this video, we were still somehow able to make a quality build. Let's jump into some live commentary and check it out. It's sort of weird to say that Savannah at Dusk is finished. I've been working on this for the better part of a month and a few weeks at least. Anyways, this is the part we just made today, twice, don't remind me, and this is the main entrance. I really like the logo of Savannah at Dusk to this day. This is where our aardvark lives. She's asleep right now, it is daytime, and this is a nocturnal house. It makes sense after all. Going back out this main door of the aardvark enclosure, this will take you to the bulk of Savannah at Dusk. On your left, you'll see our first exhibit, the horned viper. They're really hard to see sometimes, and can bury themselves in the sand. We'll look for them later in the ending cinematics. This is the main aardvark enclosure. It's quite spacious, even though there's only one solitary aardvark in here. Unlike our fennec fox enclosure, there's 4 of them in here. It looks like only one's in the bulk of the enclosure though. The other 3 must be in the back rooms eating. That's where most of their food is. This is our sacred scarab beetle. Looks like pushing a pile of dung right now. I guess that's how they get their exercise in. Coming through this door, you'll see the African crested porcupine enclosure. The bane of my existence in this episode. I had to build this thing like 5 separate times, and I'm still not happy with the product. Long story, we'll get to that later. This is our Goliath frog. I'd rather focus on something happy right now, so let's continue with the tour. They're incredibly large, I guess that's why they're called Goliath. This is the caracal exhibit. We made this in the last episode, and it looks like she's asleep as well. I guess that's why it's a night house. Most of these animals, actually all of these animals, are nocturnal. We'll get rid of the lights eventually here, so we can have the animals running around in their natural environment. This is the outside exhibit of the caracal. She doesn't come out here nearly as much. I don't know if it's too hot or what the problem is, but she likes the inside portion a lot more. Maybe it's the waterfall. It is one of my favorite design parts of Savannah at Dusk, by far. Overall, I'm really happy with the outside design. There's a lot of foliage around, a lot of curbs, details, highlights, and this outside porcupine enclosure, which mind you I only had to build 1 time, looks incredibly nice. Overall, I'm really happy with the product. I really do hope you guys enjoyed this Savannah at Dusk mini-series. I know I had a lot of fun building it. As for what comes next, I truly don't know. I need to get this save issue figured out. But until then, Kingpin out. See you in the next one.